Hi guys, welcome back to another video, and if you haven't checked out our off-road version of this video, may I suggest you go and watch that first. You can see us potter around Tixover Quarry, do some gentle off-roading while we were at Darkside Developments Tixover Takeover Day. I plugged in our Autel and recorded the data from the Haldex and put it up on screen. You might find it fascinating about how much the car's in four-wheel drive or how little the car's in four-wheel drive. Like I say, go and check out that video first and then maybe come back to this one if you haven't watched that one. Anyway, on to today's video, and today's video is all about how the Haldex operates on road. I did the same sort of thing, plugged the Autel in. Me and Alana were just going about our daily basis, doing our chores, that sort of thing, and we were blessed because we had a bit of dry weather to start with, and then it turned wet and then got really wet, so there's a real mix. So you get to see how the Haldex kind of differs between the dry weather and the wet weather. For those of you that don't know what a Haldex is, basically a Haldex is fitted to all sorts of vehicles out there, to Skodas, VW, Audis, that sort of thing, but also to Land Rover Freelander 2s and other cars out there. What it is basically, I'm going to really simplify it down, but it's clutch plates, oil, pumps and a brain, and basically the car will run in front wheel drive mode for pretty much all of the time, and then when it senses any lack of traction, pretty much quicker than you can blink, it will jump in the rear wheels so they can add drive and help you out if you need additional traction. All this without you knowing. You don't feel it in the car, you don't feel it going from front wheel drive to four wheel drive at any point. It's all completely seamless, but you get obviously the added benefit that as a four wheel drive car, you're not driving all four wheels all the time, which burns more fuel and costs you more in your pocket. That it can disengage itself, let you run in front wheel drive. Like if you're in on a motorway for a long period of time, you'll pretty much spend all of your time in front wheel drive. And then obviously if you do have a bit of a slipping moment, even without you noticing that there might be a bit of lack of traction, then it'll jump in the rear drive, and then you will have four-wheel drive for a brief moment or however long it senses, and then it'll fade out the rear drive. I'm going to switch to the laptop now. Hopefully I should be in a little circle or square up in your top corner and you should see the screen. Let me full size this before we start. There's our lovely logo. Let me click play. The first clip I will tell you, obviously as you can see there's a large blurring of it. It's because this is right outside our house and our first bit of the journey, and I don't really want to give away our location to all and sundry, so I've just blurred that middle bit out, but you can still see the data here. I'll give you a quick brief run through about what you're seeing. You've obviously got the front left wheel speed, front right wheel speed, rear left wheel speed and rear right, easy for me to say, wheel speed. And then you've got the axle speed delta. Unfortunately for the first couple of clips or so, I forgot to change it over to miles an hour. It defaults to kilometers an hour, but basically that's going to be the rough speed difference between the front axle and the rear axle. That's also quite interesting to see how that fluctuates between. And I think it uses a mixture of obviously all four of these wheel speeds, because if one wheel starts spinning up, like the front left for example, then it will know to engage the Haldex and transfer to the back wheels. But I think it also uses this axle speed delta to make sure across the axle that both front wheels are not spinning up as well. We've also got the Haldex clutch temperature. That was interesting on the off-road video, how that went kind of up, and how on road you'll see how it somewhat stabilizes. And then we have the Haldex clutch engagement. This is probably the most important one to look at, and the one that we'll be focusing at the most is this Haldex clutch engagement, because as you can see at the bottom, basically when it's sitting at 0%, it basically means that all the clutch plates are spread apart and no drive is going to the rear wheels. When it's at 100%, it doesn't mean 100% of the power is going to the rear wheels. How can I say this without it being confusing? It basically means 100% of 50% of power goes to the rear wheels. With all cars with Haldex, the maximum you can achieve between the front and rear wheels is a 50-50 split. So you'll always have 50% at the front, and then if the Haldex goes to 100%, then that means 50% of drive is going to the rear. The Haldex is fully binded together and it's putting as much power as it's physically got to the rear wheels. When it's at 0%, that basically means, like I say, it's apart, and then the Haldex isn't transferring any power to the rear wheels. The reason why I've included this clip, even though it's right outside the house and I've had to blur it, the surroundings don't really matter so much. You can see the speed when we set off. But the Haldex clutch engagement, a lot of people turn around and say that when you start up, well, probably more in the Freelander world. Obviously, I don't know if this comes across to the Skoda world, but when you start up a Freelander, it starts almost with the Haldex fully engaged, and then if you turn or after you set off for a period of time, it fades out. I think we get a similar effect here, but I don't think it's quite as big as people make out. Like I say, it might be different for the Freelander world. Unfortunately, I can't get this sort of data from the Autel from a Freelander. For some reason, I can get the train response data and I can get the rear diff data, but I don't seem to be able to find a way to get the Haldex data. If anyone knows how, feel free to write it in the comments, email me or something like that, because this would be fascinating to do on the Freelander too. So as you can see, 39%. I'll keep stop starting the video as we go. And then just as we set off, obviously, Alana's only crawled, and I'm going to call it pre-engagement. We'll see it later in the video, but I'll keep referring to it as that until we get to another clip further in the video. As we start to roll, the Haldex clutch engagement pretty much fades out to 0.79%. As you can see, we just started crawling on the speed. This data, it's not going to be 100% correct because unfortunately the data that's being transferred from the Haldex to the car is going to be so fast with the amount of data that's getting sent. With the Autel, it's obviously coming through the OBD port and then through a Bluetooth connection to the phone. And with Bluetooth, obviously you're not going to be getting lightning fast data all the time because there's limitations on transfer rates, that sort of thing. So it's obviously taking a snapshot every whatever 10th of a second that Bluetooth can do. I'm not sure, but so the data might not be perfect or entirely scientific, but this isn't a scientific video. I'm trying not to waffle on too much, but yeah. Right. So we're just setting off. Alana's winding the lock on to turn left away from our house. And as you can see, the Haldex is fluctuating. It's gone down to 1.57%, so hardly anything's going to the rear wheels. And then just as she crawls off the driveway, there you go, she started putting her foot down. And as you can see, the one thing that I'd be interested, I don't know if anyone actually knows out there, is does the Haldex purely rely on wheel speed sensors, i.e. what these figures and this figure here is doing, or does it also have a sense of torque? Like, can it judge torque from the prop shaft or from torque across the front axle or anything like that? Because the one thing I can't conclude in this video is whether or not it's just working on the figures, i.e. if you turn left, like the inside wheel is going to spin a bit faster than the right to be able to turn. That is it just working on the wheel speed sensors, or is it actually an element that it can feel a build up of torque that it then increases the amount that it closes up the Haldex by sensing torque, basically, that when it reaches a certain threshold it knows there's highly likely to be wheel spin, so therefore transfer or like give power to the rear wheels. But yeah, just as she started putting foot down, you can see that it kind of spikes a bit, it drops back down a bit, and it's quite fascinating to see this figure go up and down because we're basically now on the straight, and you just think, well, already it would sit at 0%. She's not really giving it much welly, kind of slowly creeping down the road. Yeah, but as you can see, it's fluctuating up and down, in and out. And I'm just going to pause it quickly. One thing that people sometimes get confused about the Haldex, and this is kind of part of the reason why I wanted to make this video, is some people actually turn around and say that the Haldex is either on or off. Surely it's not somewhere in between, and I think this video goes a long way to show that there's a lot of in between. It's constantly varying the amount of power going to the rear wheels. As you can see here, even tiny amounts, 0.39%, I don't know the mass, but 0.39% of basically 50% of torque is hardly anything, but even so it still feels the need to add a little bit of power to the rear wheels. So yeah, just getting to the end, I think there you go, as she comes off the throttle, you saw it drop down to 0%. That's one thing that I noticed in this, that off throttle it drops down to 0%. With the off-road video, it was a bit weird. The Haldex seemed to sometimes jump up even though, well, Alana was off throttle, so not quite sure what's really going on with the off-road side of things. This clip, nothing too interesting, just a really lumpy, bumpy, potholed road. And I'm going to put out my thoughts and suggestions. Maybe you'll be thinking the same as me, or maybe you think different, but quite a lumpy, bumpy, potholed kind of road. I actually thought that each time a wheel would hit a pothole, the Haldex would jump in all the time, and along these sort of roads the Haldex would be kind of upwards of almost fully closed, almost this Haldex clutch engagement being kind of like 80%, 90% every time we hit a pothole. It would jump and spike, jump and spike. But as I run this clip through, as you can see, that even nice little bit of lumpy road there, as you can see, Haldex doesn't even jump in. I'm guessing that's because there's no wheel spin going on, so therefore all the wheels are under complete control. 3%, 2%, really not much happening as far as the Haldex goes. It's got no concern for this road whatsoever. Even just there, quite a lumpy section there, it barely triggered the Haldex to really jump in and do any work whatsoever. So yeah, we'll just let this clip run through, as still hardly anything. But it's still, what's interesting is that it was still engaged, it was still sat there. It never went down really to 0% like in this clip, but I think Alana's off throttle at this point. It never really went down to 0, so it was never fully disengaged, as to say. This clip, very fascinating. It's what a lot of people will do on a daily basis. We're coming down to this road. This is a slip road, busy main dual carriageway, and it's one of them things you're basically on a, well, pretty much stopped going all the way up to 70 mile an hour, pretty much as quick as you can. Very busy, fast flowing road, let's say. So yet again, I thought this would be another instance where the Haldex, as soon as Alana got on the throttle, it'd be fully closed up and it'd be full 50-50 drive split between the front and rear wheels to really push the car forward, keep it nice and flat and neutral. So when I watched this back, I was like, oh, okay then, that's quite interesting. So yeah, we're off roll, Haldex clutch engagement down to 0%, just slowing down for the junction, checking to make sure there's a space for Alana to merge into, and then here we go. Alana's not quite giving it the beans per se, but she's giving it a good lot of welly. As you can see, the revs are all the way up to just over 2,500, getting towards 3,000 before switching gear. I'm guessing she'd probably be in second gear right now, switching to third. But as you can see, it was quite interesting because the theory was kind of there, but I was actually surprised about how little the kind of Haldex engaged. 27.5% there, so still pretty much predominantly front wheel drive in these circumstances. The car's really waiting for the front wheels to spin to really do any significant shifting of the work, let's say. But yeah, let this roll forward. 20%, we're still on the throttle, still speeding up. Obviously Alana's getting off the throttle a little bit, and you can kind of tell that Alana's not quite giving it as much throttle response as what she was. As the speed's increasing, she's kind of getting off the throttle a little bit because she don't have to go pounding up to 70 as quickly as she possibly can. This ends Santa Pod Raceway, for example, so you can kind of see the Haldex just start to feather out a little bit, and as she switches gear, there you go, we're still speeding up a little bit, but the Haldex is kind of fluctuating a little bit, 0%. And this is quite fascinating because I think this is what a lot of people would kind of expect to happen. We're at 60 miles an hour, as you can see, and axle speed delta are less than a mile an hour, hardly anything, on a slight curve. And the Haldex has gone, right, we're coasting, I can fade out, and it's gone to 0%. And then you'll see, as we travel along this road, even though the steering is slightly turned, so the wheels are going to be ever so slightly different rates. Bear in mind, we're down to the 0.00, like 0.01 of a mile an hour. That's going to be hardly anything. So the slight turns in the steering wheel, I would have thought you'd notice these slight turns in the steering wheel, that when you're down to that sort of specific number, 0.01 of a mile an hour. As you can see, the Haldex temperatures climbed up a bit. We were at about 11 degrees, I think, when we set off, now up to 13.9. I think I have worked out that the Haldex uses the passing air underneath the car to keep itself cool. As you can see, that's at 13.9, and I think that, yeah, it's cooled by the airflow. But as you can see, just cruising along. Alana hasn't got the cruise control set just here. She's just on the throttle, just keeping it very neutral position. And as we go along this road, the Haldex never cuts back in again. The Haldex stays at 0%. Down to Roundabout. Another, I thought I'd include almost all the things you'd normally come up against on a normal road trip, roundabouts, junctions, that sort of thing. So we're slowing down. Obviously, Haldex is disengaged because we're off throttle. And then bit of a potholey roundabout. As we turn in the dry, 0.79%. I thought it actually cut in more, but obviously it's clever enough to know that as long as one side of the wheels are rotating at a similar rate compared to the others, it will then know that the car's turning. I'm going to assume it's not getting data from the steering wheel. I wouldn't have thought there'd be a steering angle sensor on the Yeti, so I'm just going to assume it's basically using the right side and comparing the data from the right side to the left side, that if the left side is moving at the same rate and the right side is moving at the same rate, then it must be turning, because obviously the right side, when going around a roundabout, will be traveling that little bit faster than the left side. But as you can tell, dry weather, don't really need much from the rear drive, so the Haldex don't really put any work in. Now, slightly greasy conditions, we're now going to progress from dry, well, pretty much dry, to kind of greasy to full wet conditions. This is another example, back to the same roundabout, but come at it from a different angle. This isn't about the roundabout, this is about the slip road, because we're going to take the exit up here and head on to the dual carriageway. So here we go, onto the roundabout. Haldex, similar sort of thing, even though it's a bit greasy, same sort of percentages, probably a bit more at that point. Obviously, Alana's given it a bit of throttle to get onto the slip road. And I don't know if this is down to the greasy conditions, but the engagement is starting to rise a little bit. Coincidental? Maybe. Who knows? The percentages when it was in the dry generally seemed quite low, whereas now it's a bit greasier. The percentages seem to be climbed a little bit, almost like it knows from the tyres that that there's a bit of maybe tiniest amount of wheel slip. As we're going up this slip road, decent chunk going on from the Haldex, uphill, 20 odd percent, almost rising to 30%. Keep an eye on this figure right now, because one thing that I found fascinating when watching this back, and I've probably said fascinating far too many times, but yeah, this sort of thing does geek me out quite a lot. As Alana blends off the throttle, I do think the Haldex notices almost, I don't want to call it whiplash, but I think it notices that blend off the throttle, because you'll see the Haldex spike to almost 90%. And I think it briefly gets a bit confused about what's going on. It doesn't realise that almost Alana's coming off throttle. Maybe it's a rate thing, that if you come off throttle fast, it blends in the Haldex quite a lot, whereas if you do it gently, it doesn't do it so much. But yeah, as we can see, 15%, 16%, getting the speed up, 50 odd mile an hour, and then down to 0% at this point, because Alana's coming off the throttle. There you go, there's the 98%. You see it just there, just for a brief moment. Hopefully I can rewind this back. I'll see if I can pause it in the right, there you go. Like, for some reason, even though all the figures, like I say, the throughput of the Bluetooth connection isn't going to be perfect, but even though all the figures are pretty much matched quite closely, the actual speed delta is still less. It's not even half a mile an hour. Haldex clutch temperature, that's by the by. Obviously that's climbed a bit, but the engagement just for a brief moment, and I think it's as Alana kind of comes off the throttle to basically go from speeding up to staying at a set speed, because up here we've got a 50 mile an hour speed restriction, so it's pointless flying up to it. It just briefly spikes to 98%, which means that for a brief moment the car was in almost a full 50-50 four-wheel drive split for a brief moment. And this sort of figure don't come up that often in this video, which is actually quite a surprise, like I say. But yeah, as it kind of works itself out, goes down to 0%. Alana's probably slowing down a little bit as she's kind of at the speed. But yeah, another perfect example of an everyday thing. Traffic lights. I'd say now we're into wet conditions. It's gone from greasy to kind of quite wet. Another instance that I actually thought the Haldex would do more work than it actually does. Almost do more work. Red light, yellow light, and then let me just pause it. There you go, green light. I'm going to use that word pre-engagement again, and I'm not going to talk about it at this point because there's a more suitable clip slightly further on. But just as Alana sets off, barely any mile an hour whatsoever, the Haldex clutch has gone up to almost 60%. For this is going to be for a brief moment, so the clutch pack is quite closed at this point. Let me play it on. And then already, she's only gone up by, what, 5 miles an hour? And already the Haldex clutch engagement has already worked out Nah, front wheels got plenty of traction, we're good. I can fade out quite a lot. So yeah, 22, it goes up a bit, 38, obviously change gear, goes down 22%. So it's still there. It's still, the Haldex is still transferring drive to the rear wheels. It senses front tyres, plenty of grip. Don't need to worry too much. And as we filter round the roundabout, the Haldex go, it's just there. It's just kind of subtly putting a bit of drive to the rear wheels. Alana is driving quite gently at this point, because I do actually point it out to her in maybe the next clip about how gentle she drives, because she don't normally drive quite this gently. It was a bit odd that she was being so almost kind on the car. Not that Alana's particularly aggressive. Alana might shout at me for saying that, but yeah, she likes to give it a bit of throttle, a bit of welly. She enjoys the car for what it is, and she's not scared to use what she has. This is where I was mentioning to her about how sedate she was. So she went into this roundabout and actually kind of threw it in a little bit and threw it round the corner, give it a bit of welly. And I was kind of glad. I had the basically data being recorded, but I couldn't really see it. So I was fascinated to match this up with the video footage and actually see with this instance of how it reacted with the Haldex. Wet conditions, into a roundabout, off camber slightly, all the recipes. Are thinking, well, surely now that would be for full four-wheel drive. Easy for me to say. Slowing down for the roundabout, 0% clutch engagement. And then she kind of puts it into the left, gives it a big chunk of, well, not a big chunk of, but a medium chunk of welly, gets the lock on to turn it right round the outside. Like I say, the slope, the off-camberness of the roundabout doesn't help this roundabout one bit, but still 15%. She's on the throttle to come out of the roundabout. We're climbing 19%, 27%, going for the gear change, and obviously Haldex, like, yeah, done my job. I can chill out now. 18%, so still a bit of effort going in there. Onto this clip. I've sped this part of the clip up because I am really I've watched this back a few times and I don't really know what's causing the Haldex to almost stay engaged, but we're just going through an industrial estate, 30 miles an hour, so Alana's there, and as you can see, I kind of sped it up because watch the Haldex clutch engagement on this section of road, because as you can see, 6.3%. We're kind of at a coasting stage. It might be slightly uphill, so there might be a bit of torque going on. And this is why I can't work out if the Haldex is just using wheel speed sensors or if there is some sort of, it can sense the torque, because going by the wheel speed sensors, although the steering wheel is ever so slightly turned because we're on a constant radius corner, everything's in check and it's not too potholy overall. But yeah, as we go along, 6.3%, it holds there for a long time, and then it goes down to kind of like this 1%, 2%, 3% kind of mark, but then it holds there, and it just stays. It's like 1.97%. It just holds at 1.57. So 1%, it's holding, and it never fully releases. And normally, in a lot of the other clips, the Haldex, as soon as it notices it's coasting, it generally drops down to 0 miles an hour. But here we are, and then it goes down. This is about as low as it gets, 0.39%, but then it holds there. I don't know if it's because we're going slightly downhill, but even though we're going downhill, it doesn't fully disengage. So it must be a bit of effort. Alana's on cruise control, as you can see from this green icon. 0.39%, 0.79. Then it goes back up a little bit as we climb uphill. But yeah, a bit weird with that, how it didn't take the opportunity to fully engage. It obviously noticed something there that it wanted to stay ever so slightly pre-engaged. It was obviously, there was something being told to it that it's like, we're not in a condition where we can fully disengage. There needs to be an element of power transferred to the rear wheels. And then back at normal speed as Alana heads to the roundabout, slowing down, and then obviously 0%. So as you can see, let me just go back a bit. As you can see just here, come off the throttle fully and it does go down to 0%. So it's not as if it was stuck there or for some reason it couldn't go down to 0%. It can, because you see it there. So there obviously must have been an element of throttle still applied, like the smallest amount when it was going downhill. But yeah, weird. Car park. Another situation, I thought crawling around at these sort of speeds, it would generally pre-engage almost like the Haldex quite a lot, but as you can see, it doesn't. I guess that's really to help the car turn. That one of the great things about the Yeti and probably 4x4s with Haldexes in general, they can maneuver really well. And I do think that part of that maneuverability, if I can get the word out, is down to the fact of it can run as a front wheel drive car. I don't know if a car that runs in full 4-wheel drive all the time and obviously has locking diffs, that if the diffs are unlocked, I don't know if they can turn quite as well, because obviously you've got the drag from the rear wheels at any sort of throttle input. You're driving all 4 wheels all of the time. Whereas in this situation, you can really get a lock on and you've not got the back wheels pushing you forward, as to say. Just thought I'd put that out there. So yeah, pretty much full lock. Haldex pretty much disengaged. Waiting for this car. We both expected this car to actually go there and then jam it in reverse and come backwards at this point. So as you can see, my eyes are fixated on that car. Not that I don't trust Alana's driving, because I do, because she thought the same thing as me. But yeah, that was just a funny thing. Like, as you can see, she glanced over just to make sure, are you actually going in that space? But this is the interesting bit. I generally think that when the speed gets down to below 4 miles an hour, but above 0 miles an hour, that when you get into that sort of realm, I think the Haldex is pre-programmed to put a lot of engagement into the clutch plates, because I think between almost above 0 but below like 4 or 5 miles an hour, I think it's in that situation where things can happen so quickly that it needs to almost be pre-engaged, so it can do a mix of either disengage quickly or fully engage quickly, because it's right in that middle, rather than going from fully disengaged all the way to fully engaged. Because yeah, there's, as much as there's nothing between it, that delay could cause more wheel slip than what's needed. So it's like you kind of see there 27%, and then we speed up a bit, and then straight away it starts dropping back down again to single digits. 9 miles an hour, still hardly anything. I think it's in its happy place. And then if you notice, when we start maneuvering, so 6 miles an hour, there's nothing. 5 miles an hour, there's nothing. We get to 3 mile an hour, and obviously nothing right then. But then just as we put it in reverse, this is where I think the pre-engagement thing comes from. That if you look, we're down to like single digits. We're back again. Unfortunately, the other GoPro overheated, so you might see a slight jump or a slight continuation on the footage or whatever. But anyway, we're back. Nice cool GoPro again. Onto this pre-engagement. As you can see, 37.4%, and I'll keep kind of pausing it, that as we speed up a little bit, it kind of drops out a little bit, but it really fluctuates, like 1% there, because we're moving a reasonable rate, so it's getting some data back. Even it's kind of on standby, and then as we drop out again, there you go, as we drop below 1 mile an hour, yet again, the Haldex gets that sort of area of 27.5%, just as we get to that sort of crawling pace. Yet again, I think it's because all the speeds that it's getting are almost so varied. I wonder if sometimes the data capture on it can sometimes skew the information that it receives a little bit. Because it's like this, for example, it's reporting that the right rear, obviously I don't know if all these speeds are getting captured at exactly the same time, or if they're all getting captured at slightly different times. So I don't know if this is the exact data that the Haldex will be receiving. But as you can see here, the rear right, 2.17 mile an hour, but yet the front left, 1.12. There's almost, well, there's over a mile an hour difference between the front left and the rear right. So I think that's what also causes the Haldex to kind of jump up quite high, because it might think there's a bit of wheel slip. Obviously, we are on a stony car park at this point. We've moved from the tarmac to stone. So whether or not that's had an influence, and one of the wheels is starting to kind of skip on the stones a little bit. And then as the speeds come back in line, drops back down. But there you go. We're completely stopped at this point. Alana's going from first to reverse. And yet again, the Haldex has jumped up. And I do think it's almost that ready state, this 33.5% sort of mark. This almost I'm ready just in case you do need me kind of area. 30% goes back down again. But it's still, all these percentages, these are the highest ones we're seeing since Alana went up a slip road and kind of give it a good bootload, as to say. So it's quite interesting that the highest percentages are actually coming from when the car's parking. So people that say, oh, I never go off road, so therefore the Haldex is fine, never gets used, that sort of thing. you might be surprised if you do a lot of slow speed maneuvering, parking up, that sort of thing. Your Haldex is probably getting a far more pounding than what a Haldex that does go off-roading is getting, because the Haldex isn't always engaging all that much. It's one of them mentalities that, I don't know, maybe people think that because they're on road and they don't drive aggressively or anything, their Haldex doesn't get used. Who knows? Obviously, I don't want to put any too controversial views out there. But yeah, again, 20%, 40% we're at now. Yet again, it says that all three wheels are not moving, but the front right is moving at 0.43. Like I say, I do think there's like a capturing lag, delay, that sort of thing when it captures this data, because I'm pretty sure not one wheel is moving and the rest are not in this circumstance. And especially that it thinks there's a speed delta of 0.19 when it's like, well, hang on a minute, it could be true. But I do think that the Haldex clutch engagement percentage is there or thereabouts of what it's doing. Yet again, still crawling, and we're at 40 odd percent, 43%, 44%. So we're almost at what, close to an area of 75% front wheel drive, 25% rear wheel drive kind of split at this sort of percentage, roughly, give or take. And then roll it on a bit more, 46, 47, and then we're parked up. And then, I don't know if you saw it just then, it kind of dropped down to like 30 odd percent, almost like a ready state. I don't know if the Haldex can tell if the handbrake is applied or not, because there's another clip where it seems very apt that the Haldex percentage drops the minute Alana goes for the handbrake. Like I say, I don't know if that's a coincidence or if it also knows, I don't know, via a wire or something like that, because a lot of these cars have like CAN bus things and that on it, that all data goes everywhere. I don't know how many inputs the Haldex has, whether it's purely from the wheel speed sensors or whether there's actually more feeds into it. I'm not sure. I'll leave that to people that are far more geeky than I am. So yeah, it kind of fluctuates a little bit, but yeah, settles on 0%. Perfect example, when we got to this junction, I thought, oh, bingo. Junction, 90-degree turn to the right, really wet, greasy, horrible, nasty conditions. Another example that, as you can probably guess, what I thought probably wasn't true. Another example, I thought as the car's kind of turning out on pretty much almost full lock, Alana doesn't give it welly as such, but she gives it throttle, that obviously that inside front wheel you would have thought would be wanting to spin up, and the outside front wheel obviously to be gripping and driving round the corner. With a lot of front wheel drive cars, if you give it welly on full lock, the inside front tyre will end up spinning up most times if you give it enough welly. But obviously Alana doesn't give it quite that much welly. There's no wheel spin. But it was quite interesting, yet again, that the Haldex didn't jump in more, as to say, wait for this car to stand into the junction, road is clear, we set off, and let me just go back again. Hopefully there. Right, I don't know if it's there. As Alana starts creeping, we're back into that scenario yet again. Less than a mile an hour, and the Haldex has gone to 30 odd percent. Getting a bit of a common theme, and that's why I think that in the sort of, I said below 4, but I think in this sort of remit where you just start to creep, I think that's when the Haldex probably works the very hardest. In that for a brief moment the clutch plate's almost, it kind of that sort of thing, it kind of goes together then aparts, because as we can see here, for a brief moment it's almost in that ready state, 30 odd percent. Then as the speed starts increasing, it starts dropping off, because it knows, right, there's no wheel slip here, we're good. 5%, 16%. So really not much going on apart from the initial kind of that brief period. Not much going on with the back end as far as power delivery. And then as we start pulling away in a more straight condition, that's when more drive gets delivered to the rear wheels. Yet again, it was interesting, from the dry condition there wasn't too high percentages, and then from this wet conditions, probably as you would expect, slightly higher percentages again. But 30 odd percent, 28%, 18%, 22%, it's kind of there. There's a decent, you could say a decent chunk going to the rear wheels. It's not like the 1 or 2% sort of thing. There's quite a decent chunk overall getting sent to the rear wheels as we speed up. And I think you'll see that anomaly, there you go. I think it's when Alana kind of comes off the throttle when she gets to a speed she's comfortable at, or even blends out of the throttle just a little bit, because she don't need quite as much acceleration. It's another example where for a very brief period the car jumps into a full 50-50 split almost. It's not quite 100% clutch engagement, but 98% is nigh on there. So yeah, and then it fades down again, 69%. So maybe there was a tiny bit of wheel slip for all I know. Who knows? And then as Alana comes off throttle, heading towards this corner, Haldex kind of goes to 0%. And this is, I think, one of the final clips. As we're getting to a set of traffic lights, we'll see the clutch pre-engagement, well, Haldex clutch pre-engagement type thing. Set of traffic lights, 0%, coasting down. And then just talking about a lorry there. And you see here that Alana's not got the handbrake on at this point. We've coasted down, we've come to a stop, all the speeds at 0 miles an hour, but the clutch pre-engagement is at 33%. And then it sits there for a bit. Then as you see Alana yoink on the handbrake, there you go. As she pulls the handbrake, that goes to 0%. Coincidence, or does it actually know when the Haldex is applied and when it's not? When the handbrake's applied, sorry, and when it's not. And then as soon as the handbrake's applied, the Haldex goes, I can chill out now, because it seemed to hold at that 33 kind of percentage mark, or that 30 odd % mark for quite a while before it finally dropped off. So I think it's that level of when it's in that state of ready, just in case you need it aggressively as you take off, that it's there ready to respond, and then sits at 0%. And that's the end of those clips. Leave all your thoughts, feelings and that below. There's probably quite a lot of you that have tuned out from this video. If you've got through to this point of the video with my stutteriness, then thank you very much for watching. It's always very much appreciated. If you like this type of video, I know some of you do because I did a very long Freelander 2 video, then feel free to stick a like or a comment down below. That would be appreciated immensely because it lets me know that you enjoy this type of videos. I'm going to say goodbye. So goodbye from me, and I'll catch you in the next video. Right, goodbye and splat. Don't it look grim up ahead? It looks grim just everywhere. Up ahead, behind, to the side. Grim to the side of me. Grim to the other side. Exactly. Grim everywhere. Crashing the middle.